Starting a conversation with a stranger, it can be pretty daunting, right? But what if you thought about it less like a simple hello and more like, well, a performance? In this explainer, we're going to dive into some source material that lays out two really distinct, almost theatrical strategies for breaking the ice. So let's dive in. So here's the game plan. First, we're going to look at the main problem everyone faces. Then we'll break down two fascinating techniques from our source. One turns a regular clothing store into your own personal stage, and the other is called the 10 p.m. rule. After that, we'll get into the psychology of why this stuff is supposed to work, and we'll wrap it all up with a final thought. All right, first up, the central challenge. Before we get into any of the how-tos, let's really define the core problem that our source material is trying to solve. Look, at the end of the day, it all comes down to this one simple question. But instead of just giving you some cheesy pickup lines, the material we're digging into here, it suggests something totally different. The idea is to turn that whole first interaction into a short, memorable performance, right from the very first second. Okay, so that brings us to our very first method, which the speaker in our source material actually calls a personal favorite. And trust me, it's unconventional, to say the least, and it all happens in a store. So the source breaks this down into 5 really clear steps, almost like a playbook. It takes you from setting the scene all the way to delivering that final line. Let's start with the setup. Okay, first things first. You gotta look the part. The source really hammers this home. Dress well enough that someone could, just for a split second, mistake you for an employee. And the setting is just as crucial. It has to be a clothing store that sells stuff for both men and women. That's the perfect backdrop for what comes next. And this is the opening line. You see someone looking at clothes, you walk right over and you say this with total confidence. The goal here? Total surprise. The source says this is so out of the blue that it usually gets a laugh, which immediately breaks the tension. All right, so this is where you pivot. Right after that initial moment of confusion, you clear things up immediately. You reveal you don't actually work there, but you frame it as, hey, I can give you a fun, unbiased opinion. It completely shifts the vibe from a weird sales pitch to something playful and personal. So you might be asking, why on earth would this actually work? Well, according to the source, it's all about projecting confidence. Yeah, it's a bold move for sure, but it's all wrapped up in this lighthearted, non-threatening package. You're not hitting on them directly, you're just starting a fun, in-the-moment conversation. It's what the source calls the casual approach. All right, let's switch gears onto our second technique, which takes us into a totally different world. We're going from the bright lights of a clothing store to the low lights of a bar. And this one is called the 10 p.m. rule. So the whole idea behind this one, it's all about the clock. The source argues that the absolute best time to make your move is before 10 p.m. Why? Well, the night's still young, people's guards are down, and you can make a great first impression before, as the source puts it, the annoying drunk guys come out. And get this, the goal isn't even to have some long, drawn-out conversation. It's to be the first memorable person they talk to that night. The idea is to set the bar so high that you become the benchmark. You're the person everyone else gets compared to for the rest of the evening. Just like the last one, this is laid out step by step, but notice how fast this is. The entire thing, from hello to goodbye, is designed to be over in about 2 minutes. Then you make a really confident exit. So here's the line it suggests use what the source calls an assumption opener. You see someone waiting by themselves and you hit them with this question. And the source makes a pretty bold claim here. It says this is true 99% of the time, and it creates this instant relatable bond. Now, this is super important. In that tiny 2-minute window, it's not about you. The source says you should use that time to ask them questions and actually listen. It shows you're genuinely interested and makes the whole conversation about them. And then comes the exit. This is the real key. Just when the conversation is getting good, you cut it short. The source even suggests faking a text from a friend as you're out. You say you'd love to stay, you give a reason why you can't, and then you go for the number. This quick getaway is what's supposed to create all that intrigue. Okay, so we've got 2 pretty wild techniques here, right? One in a clothing store, one in a bar. Now let's get into the why. What's the underlying psychology that the source claims makes these things so effective? So what the source does here is basically paint a picture of 2 completely different approaches. It's a total contrast. On one side, you've got these principles we've been talking about. Be direct, be confident, create a little mystery. And on the other side, well, that's the stuff it warns you against. hanging around for hours, looking hesitant, being predictable, or, and this is a direct quote, looking like you're salivating. So when you boil it all down, here's why the source claims this stuff works. A quick, confident approach doesn't give the other person time to put their guard up. Walking away makes them curious, and you stand out from the crowd. You're not just another person trying to chat them up. You become what the source calls the mystery guy, and suddenly they want to know more. All right, let's wrap this up. We've gone through some super specific plays, but what's the big idea here? What's the main philosophy that ties these two strategies together? At the end of the day, it really boils down to this one core message. It doesn't matter if you're pretending to work at a clothing store or pulling a fast one in a bar. The principle is the same. The source argues that by doing something unexpected and showing confidence with a quick, decisive interaction, you make a way more powerful and lasting impression than you ever would by just playing it safe. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought, something for you to chew on. I mean, both of these techniques, they take a serious amount of confidence to even try. So it makes you wonder, is that confidence something you're just born with? Or is it a skill, something you can actually practice and get better at over time?